She slid the check across the table, like Imani was a problem to be solved. $2 million. Divorce papers, already signed on one side, waiting for a signature on the other. Kang didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply folded her hands, looked at Imani the way you look at something that doesn't belong in the room, and said, "Take it. Disappear. And do it quietly." Imani stared at that check for a long moment. The number on it could buy 3 houses, could erase every debt she'd ever had, could give her a life most people only dreamed about. She pushed it back, and that is where this story truly begins. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere, you have every right to stay with me. Because what happened next, inside that dining room, changed everything. Before we go further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because we tell stories on this channel that will keep you up at night in the best way possible. Drop your city or country in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it means the world to us. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The first thing you need to understand about Imani Brooks is that she was never the kind of woman who needed saving. She grew up in Baltimore, the second of 4 children, raised by a mother who worked double shifts at a hospital laundry and still managed to have dinner on the table by 7. Her father left when Imani was 9, not dramatically, not with a fight or a scene. He just stopped coming home one Tuesday and eventually stopped calling altogether. Imani learned early that the world didn't pause to explain itself to you. You figured things out or you fell behind. She figured things out. By the time she was 26, she had a master's degree in international business, a 1-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C. she was genuinely proud of, and a job at a trade consulting firm that sent her to Seoul for a 6-week contract. She wasn't looking for anything except a good performance review and maybe some decent food. She met Tae-jun on a Wednesday. He was sitting across from her at a conference table, representing the Korean company her firm had been hired to advise. He was 32 then, younger than she expected from someone who commanded that kind of room. He said almost nothing during the first 2 hours of the meeting. He just listened, and every so often he would ask a question that was so precisely aimed it made everyone else's contributions sound like noise. Imani answered one of those questions. He looked at her the way people rarely look at anyone in a professional setting, like she was actually worth paying attention to. After the meeting, he asked if she would have coffee with him. She almost said no, not because she wasn't interested, because she had learned the hard way to be careful with men who looked at her like that, like she was something rare. But she said yes, and coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into a walk along the Han River that lasted until 2 in the morning. And by the time she flew back to Washington, she already knew she was in trouble. Called her the next day, not a text, a call. That alone told her something. They did long distance for 8 months, a brutal, expensive, emotionally exhausting 8 months, where she racked up enough international calling minutes to make her phone bill look like a small car payment. She visited Seoul twice. He flew to D.C. 3 times. On his 3rd visit, he took her to dinner at a restaurant. She later found out he had reserved the entire floor of, and he told her, without any of the careful hedging she had come to expect from men, that he wanted to build a life with her. He didn't say it like a proposal. He said it like a conclusion he had already arrived at and was simply informing her of. She laughed. She couldn't help it. "You're not going to ask me?" "I am asking you," he said. "I'm just being honest about what I want." She said yes. They were married 11 months later in a small civil ceremony in D.C. with her family, and 3 of his closest associates present. No elaborate wedding, no grand spectacle. Tae-jun had offered. Imani had declined. She wasn't interested in performance. She was interested in the marriage itself. What she did not fully understand at that point, what she understood in theory, but had not yet felt in her bones, was the weight of the world Tae-jun came from. She knew he was powerful. She knew his family ran businesses across Seoul, and that his name carried a particular gravity in certain circles. She knew there were aspects of his work that existed in shadows. She wasn't meant to look into too directly. He had been honest with her about that, in the careful, measured way a man is honest when he is telling you the truth, but also protecting you from specifics that would only burden you. She accepted that. She had grown up understanding that the world operated on multiple levels and that survival sometimes required inhabiting levels that daylight never touched. She wasn't naive. She just chose to love the man in front of her rather than the mythology around him. What she had not anticipated was his mother. Kang Mi-suk was 61 years old and had spent 4 decades cultivating the kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself. She had raised Tae-jun alone after his father died, had watched him build an empire from nothing, and had come to believe, somewhere along the way, that his success was also hers to administer. She didn't see herself as controlling. She saw herself as necessary. There is a particular kind of woman who mistakes those two things, and Mi-suk had been making that mistake for so long it had become indistinguishable from her identity. When Tae-jun told her he was marrying Imani, Mi-suk said nothing immediately. She asked to see a photograph. Tae-jun showed her one on his phone, Imani laughing at something off camera, head tilted back, completely unguarded. Mi-suk handed the phone back. "She's very pretty," she said. And then she changed the subject. Imani found out later, from one of Tae-jun's cousins who had more decency than sense, that Mi-suk had spent the weeks before the wedding making calls, reaching out to families she knew, floating the name of a woman named Seo Jia, the daughter of a business associate, educated in Paris, exactly the kind of woman Mi-suk had always imagined standing beside her son. None of it worked. Tae-jun married Imani anyway, and Mi-suk decided somewhere in that silence to play a longer game. The first year was survivable. Mi-suk was cold but not openly cruel. She spoke to Imani in careful, measured Korean that was just fast enough to be slightly difficult to follow, and when Imani struggled, Mi-suk would sigh quietly and switch to English with an air of profound patience that was somehow more insulting than impatience would have been. She would comment on Imani's cooking, her clothes, her unfamiliarity with Korean customs, all of it delivered with the particular smile of a woman who knows exactly what she is doing and has decided to call it helpfulness. Tae-jun noticed some of it. He spoke to his mother twice that first year privately, and both times Mi-suk assured him she was only trying to help Imani adjust. Both times Imani told Tae-jun it was fine. She could handle it. She didn't want to be the reason he fought with his mother. That was her first mistake. Not because she was wrong to try to keep the peace, but because Mi-suk interpreted that silence the only way a woman like her could, as weakness. By the second year, the coldness had a shape to it. Family gatherings that Imani was technically invited to, but somehow not informed about until too late. Conversations in Korean that went on just long enough to make her invisibility pointed. Compliments that were structured like criticisms. "You've done so well with your hair," considering. Small things, individually. Collectively, they built a wall. Imani started dreading the Kang estate. That itself was a kind of loss, because the estate was beautiful in the way that very old, very serious wealth makes things beautiful without trying to impress anyone, because it had stopped needing to impress people decades ago. She had genuinely liked it, at first. She had liked the idea of building a life inside it, of making it feel like home. By year 3, she would sit in the car outside the estate gates for an extra 5 minutes before going in. Just breathing. Preparing. Tae-jun never knew about those 5 minutes. That was her second mistake. The dinner that started everything happened on a Thursday in October. Tae-jun had been called to Seoul unexpectedly, something with a business arrangement that needed his direct attention. He was supposed to be gone 3 days. He kissed Imani at the door, told her he'd be back before the weekend, and said his mother had planned a family dinner that Friday, which Imani was welcome to skip if she wasn't feeling up to it. He said welcome to skip the way people say things when they want you to understand you have an option, but they're not entirely sure you'll take it. Imani went. She went because she was still 4 years in trying, because some part of her believed that if she kept showing up, kept being present, kept refusing to give Mi-suk the satisfaction of seeing her retreat, eventually something would shift. She still believed, on that Thursday, that persistence was a form of power. She dressed carefully, not to impress, but because she understood that how she presented herself in that house was a kind of armor. She wore a deep burgundy dress she knew looked good on her, and heels that added 2 inches she didn't need. She did her hair the way she liked it. She looked at herself in the mirror before she left and said quietly, to her own reflection, "You belong there." Act like it. The estate was full when she arrived. More relatives than usual, she noticed. Cousins she recognized, aunts she had exchanged careful pleasantries with over the years. And then, near the fireplace, a woman she had never seen before. Tall, elegant, wearing a cream-colored dress, with the easy confidence of someone who had never once worried about whether they belonged somewhere. Seo-jia. Imani didn't know the name yet. She just knew the particular specific feeling of walking into a room and understanding immediately that your presence has been anticipated and arranged around, rather than welcomed. My-suk greeted her at the door. Imani, she said with a warmth that didn't reach her eyes. We weren't sure you'd come. I said I would, Imani said. Mi-suk smiled, of course. Come in. Everyone is already here. The way she said everyone, the slight pause before it, the faint emphasis was a masterclass in a particular kind of social cruelty. It said, you are the last. You are an afterthought. You are at best an obligation. Imani walked in anyway, was served at a table long enough to seat 14, and Imani found her place card at the far end, between Tao cousins, who spent most of the meal talking across her in rapid Korean. The chair beside Tae-jun's empty seat, positioned at the right hand of Mi-suk's place at the head, was occupied by the woman in cream. Jia was gracious. Imani would give her that. She didn't look at Imani with contempt. She barely looked at her at all, which was, in its own way, worse. The meal moved in a kind of choreographed humiliation that Imani had come to recognize over 4 years. Compliments directed at everyone except her. Toasts to family that somehow didn't include her name. A story told by one of the aunts about a time Tae-jun had been brought home for the holidays as a child, a story that implied a history, a continuity, a bloodline that Imani was adjacent to but would never be a part of. She ate. She smiled when smiling was called for. She answered the few questions directed at her with the careful brevity of a woman who has learned that the wrong word in the wrong room can become ammunition. Then My-suk, near the end of the meal, gestured toward the woman in cream and said, with the pleasantness of someone announcing a pleasant thing, Jia's family has just finalized their partnership with the Tae-jun group. Very significant. Her father is the kind of man Tae-jun respects greatly. Pause. A look around the table. Smile. We've always thought she and Tae-jun would have made a wonderful match. The table went quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet, when something has been said that everyone knows shouldn't have been said, and nobody is brave enough to object to. Imani put down her chopsticks. She didn't do it dramatically. She set them down carefully, the way you set something down when you need your hands to be still. I'm sorry, she said, and her voice was even, which cost her. Can you say that again? Mi-suk met her eyes. I'm simply saying Jia is a remarkable young woman. That's all. You said she and Tae-jun would have made a wonderful match, Imani said. Your son, my husband. You said that at his dinner table, in front of his family, with me sitting right here. The silence had texture now. The cousins had stopped talking. The aunt had stopped eating. Even Jia looked slightly uncomfortable, which told Imani the woman had more integrity than everyone else in the room combined. My-suk's expression didn't change. You're being sensitive. Maybe, Imani said. Or maybe you said what you meant to say, and you're annoyed that I heard it clearly. It was the most directly she had ever pushed back. And she could feel it, the slight shift in the room, the recalibration, because no one had expected it, including Mi-suk. But Mi-suk recovered fast. Women like her always do. You've always been very direct, Mi-suk said, pleasantly, like a compliment. It's an American quality. Very bold. It's just not always appropriate in every setting, which was how she managed, in one breath, to insult Imani's directness, her nationality, her cultural background, and her sense of what was appropriate, while sounding like she was simply offering guidance. Imani picked her chopsticks back up. She didn't trust herself to say anything else. It was 3 weeks later when the envelope appeared. By then, the dinner had settled into the category of incidents that Imani cataloged but didn't discuss. She had told herself she was being strategic. She was waiting for the right moment, the right opening, the right words. The truth, which she admitted to herself, only in the early mornings when Tae-jun was still asleep and she was sitting alone with bad coffee and honesty, was that she didn't know how to tell him without it becoming a war. And she wasn't ready to start that war. She didn't know yet if she could survive the aftermath. Tae-jun was away again. Another soul trip, this time a full week. He called her every night, and twice she almost told him. Twice she stopped herself, listened to the exhaustion in his voice, the specific exhaustion of a man who carries a world, and decided tonight wasn't the night. The envelope came by private messenger on a Tuesday morning. No return address. Her name on the front in Mi-suk's handwriting. She recognized it from birthday cards that had always felt more like certificates of tolerance than genuine warmth. Inside was a check, $2 million, and underneath it, 3 pages of legal documentation. A separation agreement, drafted by someone who knew what they were doing. It gave Imani a generous settlement, a confidentiality clause, and a timeline. 50 days to sign. A notary contact to reach out to once she had decided. There was also a note, handwritten, 4 sentences. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. Tae-jun will understand in time. A man like him needs a woman who can stand beside his entire world, not just the part she finds comfortable. Imani sat at the kitchen table for a long time. She didn't cry. Not right away. She just sat there, holding the check, reading the numbers, $2 million, and feeling something she could only describe later as a kind of cold recognition. Like a door she had always suspected had just opened, and what was behind it was exactly what she had been afraid to find. This was what Mi-suk had always been working toward. Not just coolness, not just social exclusion, this. The check meant Mi-suk had calculated her, had decided on a price, had decided that Imani was the kind of problem that could be made to go away with enough zeros. What broke something in her chest wasn't the insult, exactly. It was the confidence behind it, the certainty, the quiet, assured belief that, of course, Imani would take it. That she would fold this piece of paper into her bag and disappear, and everyone would be better off, and the Kang family would breathe again, clean and uncomplicated, like she had never been there at all. She folded the check in half. She put it back in the envelope. She picked up her phone, and then she stopped. Because if she called Tae-jun right now, told him everything, the dinner, Jia, the check, the note, what would happen? She knew what would happen. She had seen Tae-jun handle people who crossed him. She had seen the aftermath, the particular silence that fell in rooms after he had made a decision. She had chosen, 4 years ago, to love the man rather than be afraid of him. But she knew, with complete clarity, that if she called him right now, the war she had been avoiding would start, and it would not be a quiet war. It would be the kind that left nothing standing. His mother, his family, his name. She put the phone down. She sat with it all night. By morning, she had made a decision that was either the bravest or the most foolish thing she had ever done, and she genuinely couldn't tell which. She was going to go to the estate. She was going to look Mi-suk in the face, and she was going to give the check back in person, because some things needed to be said out loud, in the same room, without the buffer of distance or messengers. She was going to do it alone. Not because she didn't trust Tae-jun to stand beside her, but because she needed for herself to stand up first. The estate on a Tuesday afternoon felt different than it did at family dinners, quieter, more itself. Imani had texted Mi-suk that morning, formal, direct, no room for deflection. I'd like to speak with you today. I'll come to the estate at 2 o'clock. Mi-suk had replied with a single word, fine. There were fewer cars in the drive when Imani arrived, but not none. She recognized 2 of the cousins' vehicles, an aunt's sedan, which meant this had not been as private as Imani had intended. Mi-suk had made sure of that. Of course she had. Imani sat in the car for 7 minutes. Not 5, like she usually did. 7. Then she got out. Mi-suk received her in the formal dining room, which was a choice, not the sitting room, not the smaller parlor where private conversations usually happened. The dining room, the long table, the high-backed chairs, the room designed for performance and audience. 4 relatives were present, positioned, Imani noted. Not casually seated, positioned. Mi-suk stood at the head of the table. She had the bearing of a woman who was entirely comfortable with what was about to happen. That confidence was the first thing that made Imani's pulse spike. Sit, Mi-suk said, as if Imani were staff. Imani sat. Not because she was told to, but because she wanted to see clearly, and her heels were killing her, and she refused to let something as stupid as foot pain compromise what she came here to do. She placed the envelope on the table, slid it toward Misuk. I received this, she said. Misuk looked at it, but didn't touch it. Yes, $2 million in divorce papers.
Yes.
Did you actually believe I would take it? Misuk sat down then, slowly in the way of a woman who has all the time in the world. I believe, she said carefully, that every woman has a price. Some prices are simply higher than others. Something cold moved through Imani's chest. That's not true. Isn't it? Misuk tilted her head, and there it was, the real face of it, without the social pleasantness to soften it. You came from very little, Imani. I've seen the records. Your family's circumstances. The neighborhood you grew up in. I know what $2 million means to someone like you. I don't say that to be unkind. I say it because it's true, and I think you know it. The room was very quiet. One of the cousins shifted in her chair. Nobody spoke. Someone like me, Imani repeated. Someone for whom this kind of money represents a transformation, Misuk said. It is a gift. I am giving you the freedom to build a real life. Without the complication of this, she gestured vaguely, as if Imani herself were the complication. Without the complication of your son's marriage, Imani said. Without the complication of a marriage that was never appropriate, Misuk said, and there it was, finally, the word she had been building toward for 4 years. Appropriate. Tae-jun is a great man. He built something extraordinary. What he needs beside him, what this family needs, is someone who understands our world, our culture, our values. You are not that person, Imani. You never have been. And I think you've known that. I think you've felt it every time you've walked into this house. Imani's hands were flat on the table. Why do you hate me? She asked. It came out quieter than she intended. Not broken, just direct. Just the question she had been carrying for 4 years and had never said out loud because saying it felt like an admission that she had given it more power than she wanted to. Misuk looked almost surprised. Then something crossed her face, not guilt. Not exactly. Something more complicated and less comfortable. I don't hate you, she said. And Imani believed her, which was somehow worse. Then what? I hate, Misuk said slowly, what you represent. Tae-jun has spent his entire life building something that belongs to this family, to this bloodline, to this name. And he gave part of it, gave his name to someone who does not belong to it, who can never fully belong to it. Not because of any fault of yours, she added, almost gently, but because belonging is not simply something you decide. It is something you are born into or you are not. Aunt in the corner nodded slightly. One of the cousins looked at the table. Imani looked at Misuk for a long moment. You built an empire, she finally said, and Imani will never be worthy of standing beside the man who rules it. She was quoting Misuk back to herself, something Misuk had said at the October dinner, not loudly, but loudly enough. Imani had heard it. She had been hearing it on repeat for 3 weeks. Misuk didn't deny it. That too said everything. Take the money, Misuk said. Leave gracefully. Let Tae-jun find what he actually needs. Do it for him, if not for yourself. And then she slid the envelope back across the table. Imani looked at it. The check, $2 million. The divorce papers underneath waiting. She thought about her mother working double shifts. She thought about the apartment in D.C. she had been so proud of. She thought about a Wednesday afternoon in Seoul and a man who had listened to her across a conference table like she was worth paying attention to, and who had called her the next day a real call, not a text, and who had stood in a restaurant and told her, without hedging, that he wanted to build a life with her. She thought about 4 years. Not the perfect ones. The real ones, the arguments they'd had. The silences that had stretched too long. The moments where she had been too proud and he had been too closed off, and they had found their way back to each other anyway. The way people do when they are actually in it, actually committed to the whole imperfect thing. She pushed the envelope back, firmly. I didn't marry Tae-jun for his empire, she said. I didn't marry his name or his money or whatever power comes attached to them. I married him. And no number you can write on a check is going to change what I know about who he is and what we built together. You can't buy that, Misuk. You can't dissolve it with paperwork. Misuk's expression tightened. You're making, she said, a very serious mistake. Maybe, Imani said. But it's mine to make. She stood up, picked up her bag. And then, from somewhere behind her, from the direction of the doorway she had come through 20 minutes earlier, there was a sound. Chair, a single footstep. The quality of silence in the room changed. She felt it before she understood it. The The way a room changes when someone walks into it, who changes rooms simply by entering them. She turned. Kang Tae-jun was standing in the doorway. He was still in his travel clothes. He hadn't even put his bag down. His eyes moved from Imani to the envelope, on the table to his mother, and back to Imani, and the expression on his face was one she had never seen before. Not anger, not quite, but something beneath anger, something older and colder and infinitely more controlled. He had heard. She didn't know how much. She didn't know when he had arrived, how long he had been standing there, what exactly he had caught before that footstep gave him away. But from the way he was looking at the envelope on the table, at the check visible through the unsealed flap, she knew he had heard enough. Mi-suk started to speak. Tae-jun raised one hand. And the room, the entire room, the cousins, the aunt, Mi-suk herself went completely, absolutely silent. Tae-jun didn't move from the doorway right away. That was the thing nobody in the room had prepared for. They had prepared for noise, for the kind of entrance that announces itself, that gives you a second to rearrange your face in your story. What they got instead was stillness. The specific pressurized stillness of a man who has learned that the most dangerous thing you can do in a room full of people who have underestimated you is nothing. Just stand there. Just let them understand slowly what they are looking at. Mi-suk recovered first. She always recovered first. It was her greatest skill, and Imani had come to understand her greatest flaw, the ability to compose herself so quickly that she never had to sit inside the consequences of what she had actually done. Tae-jun, she said, and her voice carried exactly the right calibration of surprise and warmth, the tone of a mother genuinely glad to see her son home early. We didn't expect you until, I know, he said. 2 words. That was all. But the way he said them flat, final, without any of the warmth that Mi-suk's greeting had been fishing for, made the aunt in the corner go very still, and made one of the cousins find something suddenly fascinating about her own hands. His eyes moved to Imani. Not a long look, barely 3 seconds, but the kind of look that contains an entire conversation. She saw the question in it. Are you all right? And underneath that, something harder. How long? She didn't answer either. She just held his gaze and let him read whatever he could find there, which was, she suspected, quite a lot. Tae-jun had always been able to read her in ways that occasionally unsettled her. He said it was because she was more transparent than she believed herself to be. She had never decided if that was a compliment. He walked into the room, not toward Imani, not toward his mother. He walked to the table, to the envelope still sitting between them, like a detonator neither woman had been willing to pick back up, and he looked at it for a moment without touching it. Then he picked it up, opened it, looked at the check, looked at the papers underneath. The room held its breath. Mi-suk said, "Let me explain." In a moment, Tae-jun said. He read Suk's separation agreement. Not quickly. He took his time with it, turning each page with the careful attention of a man who reads contracts for a living and has learned never to skim. Nobody spoke while he read. The cousin, who had been looking at her hands, looked at the wall instead. The aunt had stopped pretending to be anywhere except exactly where she was, caught. When he finished, he set the papers down on the table. He set them down gently, which was worse, somehow, than if he had thrown them. Then he looked at his mother. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. Tae-jun, that's not an answer. Mi-suk squared her shoulders. She had a way of doing that, a physical preparation, like an athlete before a race that Imani had noticed over 4 years and never commented on. It was Mi-suk telling herself she was ready. It was Mi-suk deciding not to be ashamed. "I've been thinking about it for some time," Mi-suk said. "Since the beginning, if you want the truth." "I do want the truth," Tae-jun said. "That's actually the first thing you've said in the last 4 years I've believed." It landed. Even Mi-suk felt it. Imani could see the slight tightening around her eyes, the way she absorbed the hit and redistributed it internally, converting hurt into resolve. "I did what I thought was best," Mi-suk said. "For you. For this family. That has always been my purpose." "Your purpose," Tae-jun said, "is not to hand my wife divorce papers while I'm out of the country. Someone had to—" No, his voice didn't rise. It never rose. That was the thing about Tae-jun that people who only knew him by reputation never quite understood. The stories made him sound like someone who shouted, who broke things, who made his anger visible and theatrical. He didn't. He got quieter, and the quieter he got, the more the air in the room changed. Nobody had to do this. This was a choice. You made it. Own it. My-suk lifted her chin. I am owning it. I'm telling you I made it deliberately, with full knowledge of what I was doing, because I believe it was necessary. Because you won't see what's in front of you. And what's that? That this marriage is costing you things you don't even realize you're losing. Mi-suk said, and now her voice had heat in it, not anger exactly, but conviction. The kind that comes from years of sitting with something and deciding you're right. You're standing in certain circles. Partnerships that haven't materialized because of how some people see because of perception. Because of what people say when you're not in the room, Tae-jun. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Which people, he said. People who matter. People whose respect you need. Name one. Mi-suk hesitated. That hesitation was its own kind of answer, and everyone in the room heard it. The Tae-jun group, she said finally. Chairman Park made a comment at. Chairman Park, Tae-jun said, signed a 9-figure agreement with me 6 months ago and sent my wife flowers on our anniversary because I mentioned it was coming up, and he thought that was the kind of detail that built trust. I know what Chairman Park thinks of my wife. I've had the conversation. He paused. Try again. My-suk's composure cracked. Not completely, she was too practiced for that, but enough. A breath too sharp. A blink too long. Then it's the family, she said. The people in this room. The people who have known you your entire life and who want what is best for you and who are telling you. I am telling you that this is not it. That she is not it. Imani had been standing very still. She had been doing the thing she had learned to do. In rooms like this one, making herself small, not in posture but in presence, taking up only the space she absolutely needed while she figured out what the room required of her. But something about hearing Mi-suk say she is not it, something about the flatness of it, the complete absence of any acknowledgement that Imani was a person standing 3 feet away from her, unlatched something. I'm right here, Imani said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was simply a fact stated plainly. I am in this room. I am in this conversation. You do not get to discuss whether I am sufficient while I am standing in front of you. My-suk looked at her, really looked at her, for maybe the first time since she'd arrived. Something moved behind her eyes, not softness, not apology, but something that might have been the first distant cousin of recognition. I know you are, Mi-suk said. Then stop talking about me like I'm not, Imani said. If you have something to say about my marriage, say it to my face. You've been saying it behind my back for 4 years. You've been saying it with seating arrangements and missing invitations, and that woman you brought to the October dinner to sit in my husband's empty chair. You've been saying it with this. She put one finger on the envelope. Say it now, out loud, with him in the room. Say whatever it is you actually think. The room was very quiet. One of the cousins, the younger one, the one who had always been slightly kinder, slightly less practiced, in the family art of strategic coldness, looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on earth. The aunt had gone rigid. My-suk looked at her son. You want the truth? She said. All right. The truth is that I have spent 36 years making sure this family had something worth protecting. Your father died with nothing. Do you remember that? Do you remember what nothing looks like? I raised you in it. I worked us out of it. And then you built on top of what I gave you, and you built something magnificent, and I was proud, I am proud, every single day. And then you brought home someone who is not equipped to protect what we've built, who doesn't understand it, who doesn't understand what it costs, what it still costs. She stopped, steadied. It is not about where she comes from. It's not about what she looks like. It is about what this family is and what it needs, and what I know after 36 years that you still, sometimes, cannot see because you are too close to it. Tae-jun was quiet for a moment after she finished. Are you done? He asked. No, Mi-suk said. I am not done. I am your mother, and I am telling you. You handed my wife money to leave me, Tae-jun said. Whatever you say after that, that's what this is. You found a number you thought was worth more than her marriage, and you put it on a table, and you waited to see if she'd take it. That's what you did. I did. Was it the first time? The question dropped into the silence like something heavy dropped into still water. My-suk's mouth closed. Was this the first time? Tae-jun said again, slower. Or have there been other conversations? Other approaches? Other amounts? Mi-suk said nothing, which was of course an answer. Imani felt something cold move through her. She turned to look at Tae-jun, and she could see from the set of his jaw that he had suspected, that he had perhaps known, on some level, that his mother had been working at this, and that he had chosen as people choose not to press the question because pressing it would mean having to respond to the answer. How many times? Imani said, and she was looking at Misuk now, not Tae-jun. Misuk looked at her for a long moment. Then, with the particular dignity of a woman who has decided that honesty is less dangerous than being caught in a lie, twice before. Different approaches. She didn't take those either. The cousin made a small, involuntary sound. You knew, Imani said. The words came out strange, not accusatory, not broken, just slightly stunned. The sound of someone processing a new fact that reorganizes all the old ones. You tried this twice before, and I never said anything to him, and you knew I wouldn't. You counted on that. Misuk didn't answer. She didn't need to. The answer was in the check, in the careful preparation of the paperwork, in the relatives arranged in the dining room for an audience. She had known Imani would keep it to herself, had known Imani would absorb it and protect Tae-jun from the discomfort of knowing, and had used that knowledge, had used Imani's love for him, as the mechanism of her own humiliation. Something Imani had been holding together for a very long time started to come apart. Not loudly. She wasn't a loud person when she was actually hurt. She got quiet, the way certain people do when pain reaches a particular depth, because there aren't words that go that far down. 3 times, she said, mostly to herself. Imani, Tae-jun said. 3 times, she said again. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I just kept it to myself, kept showing up, she stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. I kept thinking if I gave it enough time, if I was patient enough, if I just didn't make it a problem, eventually it would stop. It wasn't your responsibility to absorb this, Tae-jun said. I know that, Imani said. And she did know it, intellectually, with the part of her brain that was capable of being reasonable about it. But the part of her that had sat in that car, outside the estate gates, for 5 minutes, for 7 minutes, the part that had carried this alone for 4 years, because she loved him and didn't want to put it on him, that part was very tired. I know that, she said again, quieter. Tae-jun turned back to his mother. I want everyone else out of this room, he said. The cousins stood up immediately. Aunt was not far behind. One of the cousins, the kinder one, paused at the door, looked at Imani with an expression that contained more genuine sympathy than she had shown in 4 years of family gatherings. And Imani found that she didn't know what to do with it, which made it worse, somehow. Then they were gone, the 3 of them. The room felt different with only 3 people in it, in the wrong way. The way rooms feel when there's no buffer between the people who actually need to say the hard things. Tae-jun pulled a chair out from the table. Not for anyone else. He needed somewhere to put his hands, so he gripped the back of it. Jia, he said. Misuk's expression shifted. Don't, Tae-jun said. Don't construct it. Just tell me. She's a good woman, Misuk said. Her family, I know her family. I've known the Seo family for 15 years. I'm not asking about her family. He looked at his mother, steadily. Did you bring her to the estate to make a point? I brought her to dinner, Misuk said. To the dinner where Imani was present, where you seated her beside my empty chair. Misuk was silent. That's not a coincidence, and we both know it, Tae-jun said. That was a message. You were sending Imani a message. I was showing you an option, Misuk said, and the precision of that an option, as if his marriage were something provisional, something subject to revision, made the muscle in Tae-jun's jaw move once. I'm not in the market for options, he said. I'm married. Could not be, Misuk said. That's my entire point. You could undo this. You could, Tae-jun. Listen to me. I'm not doing this to wound anyone. I'm doing this because I'm watching you carry something that is going to cost you, and I am trying to give you a way out before the cost becomes something you can't recover from. What cost, Tae-jun said. Give me a specific cost. One real thing that my marriage to Imani has cost this family. Perception, not perception. Something real. The Park family dinner last spring they didn't invite. I declined that invitation, Tae-jun said flatly. I declined it because I had a conflict that week, and I didn't want to go. I told Chairman Park directly. He understood completely. He looked at his mother. Who told you I wasn't invited? Misuk said nothing. Who? Tae-jun said. Your cousin Seong-woo mentioned. Song-woo, Tae-jun said. is currently trying to get me to fund his fourth failed business venture and is absolutely willing to tell you whatever he thinks will move pieces in his direction. He let that land. You've been getting your information from people who have reasons to want this marriage to fail, and you've been treating their version of events as fact. My certainty, that immovable, 4-year certainty, flickered for the first time, only for a second. But Imani saw it. Even if that's true, Misuk said, and her voice had changed slightly less armored. Even if some of what I was told was colored, the fundamental concern remains. She is not. Finish that sentence carefully, Tae-jun said. Misuk looked at him, at her son. The boy she had raised in nothing, who had built something extraordinary, who was standing in front of her now with an expression that made him look less like her son and more like what he actually was. The most dangerous person in this room, in most rooms, and the only one who had ever loved her enough to keep that fact quiet between them. She didn't finish the sentence. 4 years, Tae-jun said. You've had 4 years with her. Dinners, holidays, time in this house, and instead of doing what I asked, instead of trying, you were running a campaign to remove her. In my house. Using money I earned. He paused. The check. Where did the money come from? A beat. The family account, Misuk said. The account I fund, Tae-jun said. The family? The account that exists because of what I built, he said. You wrote Imani a check for $2 million out of an account that is full because of me, to pay her to leave me. You understand what that is. Misuk's face did something complicated. You thought I wouldn't find out, Tae-jun said. Not cruelly, just accurately. You thought she'd take it and go, and I'd be sad for a while. And eventually, I'd see that you were right. That's the whole plan. That's what you spent 4 years working toward. The silence after that was the longest one yet. Imani had sat back down at some point. She couldn't remember when. She was watching this. Her husband and his mother, the two of them across the table from each other, the architecture of their relationship finally visible in a way it hadn't been to her before. She could see now what it cost him. She could see that he wasn't just angry. He was something older than angry. He was grieving, in the specific, complicated way that people grieve when someone they love does something that permanently changes the shape of that love. Misuk sat down too, and for a moment, a brief, terrible moment, she looked like what she was, a 61-year-old woman who had been so certain of her own rightness for so long that she had never seriously calculated the possibility of being wrong, and who was now sitting with the fact of it. I wanted what was best for you, she said. Her voice was different now, smaller. Not weak. Misuk would never be weak. It simply wasn't in the construction of her, but human. Human in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be in this room before. I know that, Tae-jun said. And he meant it. That was the worst part. He meant it, completely. And I need you to hear me when I tell you, you were wrong. About her. About what I need. About what this family needs. He straightened. And what you did, what you've been doing, I can't move past it the way I've moved past things before. This isn't something I can smooth over. Misuk looked at her son. What does that mean? She asked. It means things are going to change, Tae-jun said. Starting tonight. He picked up the check from the table. He looked at it for a moment. The number, the signature, the careful formatting that someone had put genuine effort into, and then he tore it, clean down the middle, set both halves on the table. Then he looked at the separation agreement. He gathered the 3 pages together. He tore those too. The sound of it, paper tearing in a quiet room, was the loudest thing that had happened in the last hour. Tae-jun's, Misuk said. I'll have someone from my office contact you about the estate arrangements, he said. The main house will need some changes. What changes? Misuk said. And now the first real alarm was in her voice. Because she understood suddenly what she had miscalculated. She had calculated Imani's tolerance, Imani's silence, Imani's willingness to absorb. She had not recalculated, not recently enough, what Tae-jun would do if he found out. She had told herself he would be upset, that there would be a difficult conversation, that eventually, after the emotion passed, he would see the logic. She had not calculated this. You should have a conversation with Song-woo, Tae-jun said, and with whichever relatives sat in this room tonight, specifically to watch my wife be handed divorce papers. Have that conversation soon. Tae-jun, please. I'm not ending this conversation because I'm angry, he said. I'm ending it because there's nothing left to say tonight that will be useful. I know what happened. You know I know. We'll talk again when both of us have had time to sit with that. He paused at the door. Send Gia's family my regards. Whatever you told them about why she was here tonight, fix it. Then he looked at Imani. He didn't say anything. He held out his hand. And Imani, who had been holding herself together by will alone for the past 2 hours, who had come to this house alone because she needed to stand up first, who had pushed back the check and the papers, and every calculation Misuk had made about what she was worth and what she could endure. Imani took his hand. They walked out of the dining room together. Behind them, Misuk sat at the long table between two halves of a check she had written with absolute confidence, and the silence of a house she had been certain was hers. The drive home was mostly quiet. Tae-jun drove. He almost always drove when something was wrong. It gave his hands something to do, and he processed better when he was moving, when there was something physical requiring a portion of his attention so the rest of it could work. Imani knew this about him. She had learned his architecture over 4 years, in the same way you learn a house gradually, by inhabiting it, by noticing which doors stuck and which windows let in the most light. She watched the city move past her window for a while. Then she said, "How long were you standing there?" "Long enough," he said. "How long is that?" He was quiet for a moment. From somewhere around, I believe every woman has a price, which meant he had heard almost everything, which meant he had stood in that doorway and listened to his mother's logic, to Imani's refusal, to the whole careful structure of what Misuk had built, and had chose to keep listening rather than walk in immediately. She thought about asking why. Then she thought she already knew. He had wanted to hear it, not filtered through someone else's account, not reconstructed after the fact. He had wanted to stand in the room with it and know, with certainty, what had happened. "You should have told me," he said. "I know. The first time. You should have told me the first time." "I know," she said again. "Why didn't you?" She looked at her hands in her lap. "Because I knew what you'd do. And I kept thinking if I could just get through it, if I could manage it without making it your problem, then maybe it would stop on its own." A pause. "Stupid." "It wasn't stupid," he said. "It was you trying to protect me." Still didn't work. "No," he said. "It didn't." They drove in silence for another few minutes. The city gave way to the quieter streets near their home, the ones lined with old trees that Imani had fallen in love with when they'd first moved there, before she fully understood what it meant to live inside a world that came with a family attached. She tried 3 times, Imani said. "I know." "You didn't know," she said. Not accusatory, just factual. "I suspected something," he said. Not the specifics. "But I knew she hadn't accepted this. I knew she was working at something. And I didn't push because..." He stopped. Started again. "Because pushing would have meant having this conversation. And I wasn't ready for what this conversation was going to be." Imani turned to look at him. He was looking at the road, both hands on the wheel, jaw set in that way it got, when he was holding something difficult very carefully. "Are you ready now?" she asked. "A beat, no," he said. "But we're having it anyway." She almost laughed. She didn't quite. But the almost of it was real, and it was the first real thing she had felt in hours that wasn't pain or exhaustion or that bone-deep weariness of carrying something too long. He pulled into their driveway, turned off the engine, didn't move to get out. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Tae-jun, not for what she did. That's hers." He turned to look at her. "For not seeing what you were carrying. For letting you sit in that car every time we went to the estate. Yes, I noticed. I just didn't ask. For letting that be the price you paid. For keeping things smooth. That's mine." He held her gaze. "I'm sorry." Imani looked at him for a long moment. This man she had said yes to on a phone call from D.C., who had called a real call, not a text, who had made a conclusion out of loving her and informed her of it like it was already true. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he repeated. "We're going to have to talk more," she said. "Tonight is not this isn't resolved. Tonight is just the beginning of it. I know. And it's going to be hard. I know that too." And she said, carefully, because this was the part she had been sitting with since the dining room, since Misuk's face when Tae-jun said, "Things are going to change. Whatever you're planning to do with the estate, with the family arrangements. I want to talk about it first. Before you do anything." He looked at her. "She went after my wife," he said. 3 times. "I know. And she's still your mother." Imani held his gaze. "I'm not asking you to forgive her tonight. I'm not asking you to forgive her at all. That's your choice and your timeline. But whatever happens next, I want to be part of the decision, not something you protect me from. Part of it. Something in his expression shifted. Not softened, exactly, resolved. Right, he said. Promise me, I promise. She nodded, opened her car door, paused with one foot on the driveway. Tae-jun, yeah. The check was for $2 million, she said. I want you to know I didn't even think about it. He was quiet for a second. I know, he said. Was there. I just wanted to say it out loud, she said. So it wasn't just something you overheard. She got out of the car. He sat there for another moment in the dark alone, with the engine ticking as it cooled, and looked at the front door of the house he had bought, because Imani had stood outside it, for 30 seconds one afternoon, and said quietly, to no one in particular, this one feels right. He had bought it that week. He thought about 3 attempts, 3 approaches, his mother's patience, her certainty, the careful architecture of her campaign. He thought about Imani sitting in the car outside the estate gates. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, never telling him. He thought about what it meant that she hadn't told him, not just as a fact about their communication, but as a fact about her, about the specific, particular love of a woman who absorbs damage to protect the person she loves from the cost of knowing, who calculates quietly and privately whether this is the right moment to say the hard thing, who keeps saying not yet, until not yet becomes never. He knew that kind of love. He had grown up watching his mother love him, with exactly the same misguided arithmetic, convinced she was protecting him by managing the world before he could encounter it. The thought didn't soften what Mi-suk had done. Not even close. But it was the first time he had sat with the particular complexity of it, the way love and control can live close together in a person can live so close together in difference that they stop being able to tell the difference, and the damage that accumulates in that confusion. He got out of the car. Inside the house, Imani had already put the kettle on. She didn't ask if he wanted anything. She just made tea, the way she made tea when something was hard, 2 mugs, too hot to drink yet, something to hold. He sat at the kitchen table. She sat across from him. They looked at each other across the steam. My cousin Seong-woo, Tae-jun said. I heard that part. He's been feeding her information. Exaggerated, selective, designed. He wants money. That's always what Song-woo wants. He saw an angle and he worked it. What are you going to do about it? Nothing yet, he said. Tonight, nothing. Tomorrow I'm going to make some calls. He paused. The estate, the businesses, the allowances. There are people in that family who have been living on what I provide while working against what I value. That's going to stop. Okay, she said. I want you to know what I'm planning. Tell me, she said. He did. It took 40 minutes. He laid it out, not emotionally, not with anger, but with the methodical precision of a man who has been building and dismantling things for long enough to know exactly which piece you pull to make the structure shift. She asked questions. He answered them. She pushed back on 2 things, the timing of one decision, the severity of another. He listened to both. He changed the timing. He held on the severity. By the time the tea was cold, they had something that wasn't quite a plan, but was the skeleton of one, a shared understanding of what was going to happen, what they were willing to do and what they weren't, where the lines were. This is going to get worse before it gets better, Imani said. Yes. Your mother is not going to accept this quietly. No, she won't. And the relatives who were in that room tonight. They'll have conversations with each other before morning, he said. I know. Imani looked at her tea. Is there anything about this? She said slowly. That makes you think, even for a second, that she has a point. That I'm not. She stopped. Started again. That this costs you something real. He looked at her. No, he said. Tae-jun. No, he said again. Simpler this time. Not 1 second. She nodded, looked back at her tea. Okay, she said. What neither of them said, because they were both too honest to pretend otherwise, was that the road ahead was going to be harder than either of them was fully prepared for. That the decisions they were making at this kitchen table tonight, over cold tea, in the aftermath of the worst evening in 4 years of marriage, those decisions were going to set off consequences neither of them could entirely predict or control. Mi-suk was not the kind of woman who accepted a reversal quietly. The family was not the kind of system that absorbed disruption without responding. And Seong-woo, patient, calculating, financially motivated Song-woo was sitting somewhere tonight with his phone in his hand, already thinking about what move came next. The house was quiet. The street outside was quiet. The whole evening had collapsed into this kitchen, this table, these two mugs. Imani reached across and put her hand over Tae-jun's. He turned his hand over and held hers. That was all. That was the whole thing. Two people at a kitchen table, holding on, while somewhere across the city a woman sat in a large house with the pieces of a check in front of her, and the first real understanding that she had miscalculated not the amount, not the approach, but the fundamental thing, the thing she should have seen and hadn't, that Imani had never, not once, been the weak one. And tomorrow, everything was going to change. The calls started at 6:43 in the morning. Tae-jun was already awake when the first one came in. He had barely slept 2 hours, maybe 3, the fractured kind that leaves you more tired than no sleep at all. Because your brain keeps surfacing, keeps returning to the same materials. The dining room, the check, his mother's face when she said, "I did what I thought was best." He was at the kitchen table, with coffee he had made too strong, looking at nothing in particular, when his phone lit up with a number he recognized, Park Song-woo. He let it ring. Song-woo called back 4 minutes later. Tae-jun picked up on the second ring. "It's early," he said. "I heard you were at the estate last night." Song-woo's voice had the particular texture of a man who had been awake longer than he wanted to admit, which meant he had been making his own calls, gathering his own information, trying to understand the shape of what had shifted. "Everything all right? Why are you calling, Song-woo?" "Pause. Your mother called me." She sounded she was upset. "Yes," Tae-jun said. "She would be. She said there was an incident. That she said some things were said that—" "Did she tell you what she did?" Tae-jun said. Not a question. Silence. "I'm going to take that as a no," Tae-jun said. "She called you to tell you there was a problem. She did not call you to tell you she was the problem. That tracks." He drank his coffee. "Don't call me again today, Seong-woo. I mean that. Whatever she told you, whatever she's asking you to do, stay out of it." Tae-jun, he ended the call. By 8 o'clock, 3 more relatives had called or sent messages. The aunt from the dining room, a cousin he hadn't spoken to in 2 years, who suddenly had something urgent to discuss. And Song Sung-woo's older sister, who framed her message as concern. We're all just worried about the family in a way that told him clearly the network had been activated and was working. He had expected it. Imani had told him it would happen last night at the kitchen table. And she had been right. Misuk was not the kind of woman who accepted a reversal quietly, and the people in her orbit understood that loyalty to her was the price of what she provided. The family operated like that, had always operated like that, a system of mutual benefit that everyone tacitly agreed to, and nobody talked about directly. What none of them had fully recalibrated for was the fact that the system ran on his money. He had a call at 9 with his head of legal. He laid out what he needed: documentation of the family account expenditures for the last 4 years, a review of every business position held by a Kang family member within his legitimate companies, current accounting of estate costs, and who was drawing what. His legal head was professional enough not to ask why. She said she'd have preliminary figures by end of day. Tae-jun was methodical by nature. It was the quality that had built what he had built, and it was the quality that made him dangerous in a different way than people expected when they heard his name. The stories attached to him suggested impulsivity, heat. The reality was the opposite. He was patient in the specific way of someone who knows that the most effective thing you can do is understand the complete picture before you move a single piece. So he worked. He made calls. He reviewed documents. He did not call his mother. Imani was quieter than usual that morning. She moved through the house with the careful deliberateness of someone operating on less sleep than she needed and more adrenaline than was sustainable. She made breakfast eggs, toast, the kind of practical food that has nothing to do with appetite and everything to do with keeping a body functional. She put a plate in front of him without asking if he was hungry. He ate. She sat across from him and didn't eat much. Song-woo called at 6:40, he said. She looked up. Already. She had the whole night. Imani nodded slowly. What did he want? To understand the landscape. Figure out what I know, how angry I am, whether there's a version of this where he ends up on the right side. He paused. He's smart enough to work multiple angles. Loyal to whoever's winning. And who's winning? She asked. He looked at her. We are. She held his gaze for a moment. Something in her face said she wanted to believe that, but wasn't ready to yet. She was practical that way. She didn't let herself want things before she could see they were real. It was something he admired about her on most days, and found maddening on the days he needed her to simply trust him. "I'm going to work from the study today," she said. "I have a project I've been putting off." "Okay, unless you need me for something. I'll tell you if I do." She took her plate to the sink, scraped what she hadn't eaten, stood with her back to him for a moment. Then she turned around. "Tae-jun, yeah. Don't make any of the big decisions today," she said. "Promised?" He had promised, he remembered. "Not today," he said. She held his gaze for another second, making sure it was real, then nodded and went down the hall to the study. He listened to the door close softly behind her. Then he picked up his phone and called his head of operations. The figures came back by 2 in the afternoon. He sat with them in his office, not the estate office, his personal office in the company building, 15 floors up, with the kind of view that costs what it costs, and stops meaning anything after the first few months, because you stop seeing it. And he read through 4 years of family account expenditure, with the particular hollow feeling of a man discovering exactly how much he did not know about his own house. The number was significant. Not catastrophic, he had built far too much for any single number to be catastrophic but significant, in the way that made things real that had previously existed only as vague suspicion. Money to Song-woo, twice filtered through the family account in amounts just small enough to avoid requiring his direct authorization. A series of payments to an attorney's office that wasn't his firm, a separate counsel Mi-suk had apparently retained, had apparently been using. For what purpose the documentation didn't specify, but the timing suggested clearly. The first payment was made 11 months after his wedding. 11 months. She had started building the infrastructure of this within a year of him getting married. He set the papers down, picked them up again, set them down. His legal head had flagged 3 items specifically. The attorney's retainer, a wire transfer dated 4 months ago, to a consulting firm he didn't recognize, and a smaller payment, 10,000. Barely notable against the larger numbers, but notable in context to a research service. The kind of service that ran background documentation on people. He called his legal head back. "The research service," he said. "What's the full name?" She gave it to him. He knew it. Not because he had used them, he had his own people for that, but because he knew their reputation. Discreet. Thorough. The kind of firm that delivered files, not summaries. "Find out what they produced," he said. "I want whatever was ordered and whatever was delivered. That could take a few days. They're not going to hand over client files without. Use whatever leverage is necessary," he said. "I want it by tomorrow." He ended the call. He sat back in his chair and looked at the city through the window he had stopped seeing, and thought about his mother spending 11 months building a legal architecture for removing his wife from his life. Thought about the research service. Thought about what you commission from a research service when you want to undermine a marriage. He thought about Imani at the kitchen table last night, her hand over his, saying it's going to get worse before it gets better. He had agreed. He hadn't known how much. The file arrived the following morning, not through normal channels. His contact at the research firm had apparently been persuaded Tae-jun didn't ask how to produce a copy of what had been delivered to Mi-suk 14 weeks ago. It came as a physical document, which was the firm's practice for clients who requested discretion, nothing digital, nothing traceable in the way digital things are traceable. He opened it at his desk, alone. It was 43 pages. The first section was a background report on Imani, comprehensive. Her family history, her education, her professional record, her finances before the marriage. He read it with a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. Not because the information was damaging, because Imani was exactly who she had always presented herself to be, and the report confirmed it in 43 meticulous pages, but because it meant his mother had commissioned a file on his wife, paid someone to excavate the life of the woman he loved, and deliver it as a document, looking for something to use. The second section was different. It was an analysis, not of Imani's past, but of her present, specifically her relationships in D.C. prior to the marriage, contacts at the consulting firm, people she had known. The report had found one, a man named Daniel Reeves, a former colleague, Someone she had apparently dated briefly before meeting Tae-jun and had constructed around him the kind of insinuating narrative that isn't an accusation but is designed to feel like one. Carefully worded, technically accurate in its facts. Arranged in an order that implied a conclusion the facts themselves didn't actually support. He read that section 3 times. He knew what it was. He had seen this kind of work before, the kind that bad attorneys produce and bad actors use, the kind that weaponizes ambiguity. Daniel Reeves was a former colleague. The contact had been professional. Timeline showed clearly that whatever relationship had existed ended more than a year before Tae-jun met Imani. There was nothing here, but someone had paid for it, had wanted it ready, had wanted it as a tool. He thought about when Mi-suk might have used it, or planned to use it. Had she shown it to anyone? Had she been waiting for the right moment, the right argument, the right pressure to present this file, and watch it do what it was designed to do? He didn't know. That not knowing was a particular kind of terrible, because it meant the damage might be ahead of him rather than behind. Called Imani. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey, are you at home?" Something in his voice, she heard it immediately. He knew she would. 4 years of reading each other across conference tables and dinner tables, and the kitchen table at 6 in the morning had made them fluent in each other's matoses. "What happened?" "I'm coming home," he said. Can you just be there?" "I'm here," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." He drove home himself. He didn't use the driver, because the conversation he was about to have was not one he could have in the back seat of a car with someone else in the front of it. He showed her the file. He didn't summarize it. He didn't explain it. He put it on the coffee table in front of her and let her read it, because she deserved to know exactly what it was and what it said and what it had been built to do. He sat across from her while she read, watching her face. She was very controlled while she read. Her face did the thing it did when she was processing something difficult, a slight tension around her eyes, a stillness in her jaw that meant she was holding things together by will. She turned pages without comment. The first section, the background report. The second section. When she got to the Daniel Reeves material, she stopped. She read that section twice. He could tell by the pause. Then she set the file down on the coffee table and looked at him. "Daniel Reeves," she said. "Former colleague. We dated for about 3 months, 4 years before I met you. It ended because we weren't compatible, and we both knew it. He moved to Chicago. I haven't spoken to him since, before I took the sole contract." "I know," Tae-jun said. "The timeline is in the report. I can read." She looked at him steadily. "Are you asking me to explain it?" "No, because I will if Imani," he said. "I'm not asking you to explain it. I'm showing it to you because you need to know it exists." She looked at the file on the table. A muscle in her jaw moved once. "She was going to use it," Imani said. "Not a question. I don't know if she has already." Imani was very still. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know who she's shown it to," he said, "or how she's framed it, or what version of it is currently in circulation among people who—" "Among your family," Imani said. "Among anyone she's spoken to." Imani stood up. She did it, abruptly. The way people stand up when they need to move, because staying still has become physically impossible. She walked to the window, stood with her back to him, arms crossed, not looking at anything outside, but needing the 6 feet of distance to hold herself together. "She had me investigated," Imani said. "Yes. She paid someone to dig up everything they could find on me, and when they didn't find anything actually damaging, someone put that Daniel section together to look like it meant something. That's how these firms work," he said. "They produce a usable document, and she was sitting on it." She turned around. Her eyes were dry, but barely. "For 14 weeks she's been sitting on that file, having dinner with me at that table, looking me in the face." She stopped. "She was going to use it on you." He didn't say anything. "She was going to wait until the right moment, until you and I had a fight, or until you started to doubt something. And then she was going to put that file in front of you and say, Look what your wife has been hiding." That was the backup plan. That was what she had ready if the check didn't work. Her voice had gone very flat. It wasn't anger yet. It was something before anger, the moment of total clarity that precedes it, when everything suddenly makes sense of its extent, and the sense of it is unbearable. "She built a case against me," Imani said, "over years. Different tools, different approaches, all building toward the same thing. Get rid of her." By any means that works. Yes, Tae-jun said. And you didn't know. I didn't know the specifics. But you suspected something. He held her gaze. I told you last night I suspected something. You suspected she was cold and disapproving, Imani said. Not this. Not a file. Not a— She stopped. Breathed. This is not a mother who disapproves of her son's wife, Tae-jun. This is a campaign. This is organized. This is someone who looked at me and decided I was an obstacle, and then spent 4 years building the architecture to remove me. Yes, he said. That's what it is. Imani put her hand over her mouth. She held it there for a moment. He watched her absorb it, watched her do the thing he had been watching her do since the dining room, the process of making herself carry something that shouldn't have been hers to carry. He stood up, crossed the room. She didn't pull away when he reached her, but she didn't lean in either. She stood there, hand dropping from her mouth, looking somewhere past his shoulder. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. Do what? Be in this family. Her voice cracked on the last word just slightly, just enough to make it real. I have tried for 4 years. I have shown up. I have absorbed the looks and the dinners and the seating arrangements and the Korean that goes just a little too fast. I have sat in that car and told myself you belong there. Go in. And I genuinely thought that if I was patient enough, if I was present enough, eventually I would just become part of it. That eventually she would see I loved you. That would be enough. She stopped. It was never going to be enough. No, he said. It wasn't. She looked at him. Something in her face asked him why he wasn't trying to tell her it would work out. Why he wasn't offering the reassurance that the version of him she imagined existed in moments like this would offer. Because he wasn't going to lie to her. That had always been the deal between them, even when the truth was hard. It wasn't, he said again. Not because of anything you did or didn't do, but because this was never about you not being enough. It was about her needing to win. He paused. My mother has spent her entire life winning. When my father died and left us with nothing, she won. When she raised me in circumstances that should have broken both of us, she won. When I started building this, and she saw it becoming something real, she won alongside me because she had made it possible. That's her identity. Winning. Control. Being the architect of the outcome. He held Imani's gaze. You didn't fail to win her over. You simply couldn't be won over. She can't control you. She's never been able to. And that specifically is what she can't accept. Imani was quiet for a long moment. That doesn't make it hurt less, she finally said. I know, I still feel like I failed. You didn't. I know that intellectually, she said, but I still feel it. He put his hand against the side of her face. She let him. She closed her eyes for a moment, just a moment, and he felt the weight of everything she had been holding shift, slightly not disappear, not resolve, but shift, the way weight shifts when someone else puts a hand under it. Then her phone rang. She opened her eyes, looked at the screen, an unknown number, local area code. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. Hello? A brief pause. Then a woman's voice, careful, slightly awkward. The voice of someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say but is second-guessing it now that the moment has arrived. Imani, says Jia. Seo Jia. Imani went very still. Tae-jun, reading her face, moved closer. How did you get this number? Imani said. Her voice was even, I asked. I'm sorry, I know this is unusual. I need to tell you something, and I didn't know if there was another way to— Jia stopped. Started again. I was at the estate, the October dinner. I heard things that night that I should have said something sooner. I know that. I've been trying to decide whether to say anything at all. And there's something you need to know. Imani looked at Tae-jun. He couldn't hear the other end of the call, but he could read Imani's face, which had gone through 3 separate registers in the last 10 seconds. Suspicion, calculation, something that might have been fear. Go ahead, Imani said. Jia was quiet for a moment. I was not told why I was invited to that dinner, she said. I was told it was a family gathering, that Tae-jun's mother wanted to introduce me to some business associates. I had met Mi-suk before through my father, but I didn't understand what the dinner was actually for until I was in the room. Another pause. When I understood that I was being used as a contrast, as a way to make a point to you, I was uncomfortable. I tried to leave early, you may have noticed. I noticed, Imani said. I want you to know I had no part in planning it, Jia said. I would not have come if I had understood. My family has a good name, and I don't, I don't participate in that kind of. She stopped. That's not the point. The point is something I overheard that night, before dinner, in the hallway outside the sitting room. Imani's grip on the phone tightened. Mi-suk was on the phone, Jia said. I was walking past. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard her say she was speaking Korean. But I understood she said that if the direct approach didn't work, there was documentation that could be made available. That she had consulted with someone who believed it could be used to create enough doubt, to Jia's voice dropped, to destabilize the marriage from the inside. Make Tae-jun question things himself. The room was very quiet. She was planning to show him the file, Imani said. Not to Jia, to herself. To Tae-jun, who was close enough to hear. I don't know what file, Jia said. I only heard that part. But I heard enough to know she had something she was planning to use. Something she felt confident would be enough. A breath. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I told myself it wasn't my place, that it was a family matter. But I couldn't stop thinking about your face that night, at the table. You knew exactly what was happening, and you sat there. Imani said nothing. That took a kind of strength most people don't have, Jia said. And you deserved better than what happened in that room. So I'm telling you now, because you should know exactly what was planned and how far it went. A pause. I hope that helps in some way. I'm sorry it's late. Call ended. Imani stood holding her phone at her side. The room was absolutely still. She was going to show you the file, Imani said. I know. She had a plan, a sequence. Try the check first. That fails, wait. Find the right moment. Show you the file. Frame Daniel as she stopped. Make you doubt me. Not confront me with accusations. Just plant the seed. Let you sit with it. Let it grow. She underestimated both of us, Tae-jun said. But she would have tried it, Imani said. If the estate hadn't happened, when it did. It did happen, he said. But it almost didn't, she said. And that was the thing. That was the thing she couldn't shake. The proximity of it. How close it had come. She had almost not gone to the estate that day. She had almost decided to call instead, to handle it over the phone, to avoid the physical confrontation. If she had made that choice, if Tae-jun had not come home, early Mi-suk would still have her file, would still have her plan, would still be working her timeline, with the patience of a woman who had been winning for 36 years. 4 years, Imani said. I know, she has been doing this for 4 years, and I didn't. I couldn't. She pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum like something was sitting on her chest. I told myself I was being strong. I told myself showing up was enough. But I was losing ground the entire time, and I didn't even know what I was losing it to. You weren't losing, he said. Don't, she said. Don't do that. Don't manage this. She looked at him, and her eyes were bright now, past the point of holding things back. I am telling you something true right now. I was losing. I didn't know how bad it was. And I need you to acknowledge that, instead of immediately trying to make it better, because it is not better yet, and pretending it is doesn't help me. He was quiet. Then you were losing ground, he said. For 4 years, in a system that was designed to make you lose ground, you held your position and protected me from knowing what it was costing you. And that was wrong. Your silence was wrong. And my not asking was wrong. And the ground you lost is mine to help you take back. That's true. All of it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she sat down on the couch, put her face in her hands. Not crying, she had moved past, crying somewhere in the last hour into something deeper and more exhausted than tears. Just sitting, just breathing. He sat beside her, close but not touching, giving her the space to be in it. After a while, she looked up. What happens now? She said. Now, he said, I make some calls. Which ones? He looked at her. The ones I told you I would make. The ones we talked about last night. The estate, the businesses, the allowances. And Seong-woo. He paused. And the attorney my mother retained. I want to know everything that firm was asked to do, everything they produced, and everyone it was shared with. Imani was quiet. And your mother, she said. Yes. What happens with your mother? He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that has weight in it, that costs something. I don't know yet, he said honestly. I know what I'm not going to allow to continue. I know what the consequences need to be. I don't know yet what's on the other side of all of it. He looked at her. That's the truth. I'm not going to tell you I have a clear vision of what this family looks like in a year, because I don't. She nodded slowly. But I know what this house looks like, he said. Right now. Today. And I know who's in it. She looked at him. We are, she said. We are, he said. She leaned back against the couch, tipped her head back, looked at the ceiling. I need a day, she said, before any of the big decisions. I need one day where nobody calls and nothing escalates and I can just process. Okay, can you actually give me that? I'll try, he said, which was more honest than yes, and they both knew it. She closed her eyes. He watched her breathe. Outside, the city moved. Somewhere across it, in a house that was larger than it needed to be and quieter now than it had been the night before. Mi-suk was waking up to the particular morning, after silence, of a plan that had been exposed. Not defeated yet, Mi-suk would not see it as defeat. Not yet. Because people like her do not accept defeat in the first hour of the day after. They recalibrate. They look for angles. They remind themselves that the game is long and that they have survived harder moments than this. And in a smaller apartment across the city, Park Song-woo was sitting with his phone and the knowledge that whatever side he chose next, it had to be the right one. Because the wrong one would cost him everything he had spent years positioning himself to receive. The day that Imani had asked for that single, still day was already running out before it started. And by nightfall, the person who would finally force everything into the open was not Mi-suk, not Seong-woo, not Jia with her careful conscience and her belated phone call. It was someone none of them had seen coming, someone who had been quiet for so long that everyone who had been quiet for so long done had forgotten to account for her, someone who had watched 4 years of this family's cruelty with the particular simmering anger of a person who has a conscience and a breaking point, and who had finally, irrevocably, reached it. The day Imani asked for lasted approximately 11 hours. It ended at 7:14 in the evening when Tae-jun's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize, and the voice on the other end belonged to a woman named Kang Yeon-ji, his cousin, 38 years old, the quieter one from the dining room, the one who had paused at the door with something like genuine sympathy in her eyes before leaving. She didn't waste time. I need to meet with you, Yeon-ji said. Tonight, not at the estate. Somewhere else. Tae-jun was in the study. He looked at the door, which was closed, which meant Imani was somewhere else in the house. Probably the bedroom. Probably the book she'd been pretending to read since mid-afternoon. Why? He said. Because there's something you don't know yet, Yeon-ji said. And if you don't know it before tomorrow, the damage it does is going to be a lot harder to undo. He met her at a restaurant 20 minutes from the house. Small place, quiet on weeknights, the kind that keeps the lights low enough that you could have a conversation nobody needed to overhear. Yeon-ji was already there when he arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a glass of water she hadn't touched, wearing the expression of someone who has made a decision they know is going to cost them something and has decided to pay it anyway. She was the closest thing he had to a sibling. Their mothers were sisters, and in the years when everything had been bad when his father was gone and the money was nothing, Yeon-ji's family had been 2 floors above them, in the same apartment building. She was 3 years older, and she had always been careful. Careful with words, careful with loyalties, careful in the specific way of someone who understands that living inside a powerful family means understanding that power is directional and that you are always downstream of it. He sat down across from her. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, Song-woo sent something last night. Tae-jun went still. To who? He said. To 4 people, she said. Your uncle in Busan. 2 of your business associates. She told him which ones to contact. She gave him the contact information. She told him exactly what to say. And Chairman Park. The name landed like something physical. What did he send? Tae-jun said. Yeon-ji reached into her bag. She put a single folded page on the table between them. It was a letter. Typed, formatted to look professional. Seong-woo's name at the bottom. Tae-jun read it in under a minute, and in that minute, the temperature of the room changed completely. Or perhaps the temperature of the room stayed exactly the same, and everything inside him simply dropped. The letter was careful. It was written with the precision of someone who understood that a direct accusation would be useless, possibly illegal, certainly deniable. Instead, it was framed as concern, as family worry, as a cousin reaching out privately to people he knew were important in Tae-jun's world, sharing information he felt they should have. The Daniel Reeves section of the file summarized, not attached, but summarized in enough detail that the implication was unmistakable, was presented as something that had come to the family's attention, and that they believed, with great sadness and respect for Tae-jun, warranted the awareness of people who cared about his interests. It was a character assassination letter, designed to look like a welfare check. Tae-jun set it down. When, he said. His voice was completely flat. Last night, Yeonji said. After you left the state. She made the calls. He sent the letters by this morning. How do you know? Because Seong-woo told his sister, Yeonji said. And his sister told me because she thought I should know. And she thought I should know because she is smarter than Seong-woo. And she understands that when the water level changes, you want to be on the right side of the current. Tae-jun looked at the letter. Chairman Park, he said. Yes. Park received this morning. Tae-jun was quiet for 10 seconds. He counted them internally, which was something he had taught himself years ago, when the impulse to act was at its most violent. Count to 10. Not because anger was wrong, but because acting from the peak of it was almost always imprecise, and imprecision in his world had consequences that spread outward in directions you couldn't always predict. 10 seconds then, did Park respond. His office called Seong-woo's number this afternoon, Yeonji said. I don't know what was said. Tae-jun picked up his phone. He sent a single message to his operations director. Call me in 10 minutes. Priority. Then he looked at Yeonji. Why are you telling me this? She looked back at him steadily. Because it's wrong, she said. What's been happening to Imani? What happened at that dinner? The check I was in the room, Tae-jun. I sat there while your mother put divorce papers in front of your wife, and I didn't say a word, and that is something I have to live with. She paused. I should have said something a long time ago. I told myself it wasn't my place, that it was between you and your mother, that families sort these things out, and I didn't need to be involved. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. She's been sitting in our family for 4 years, being made to feel like she doesn't belong. She comes every time. She shows up, and we let your mother run it. We sat there and let it happen, because it was easier than standing up to her. She looked at the table. So I'm telling you now. Consider it me being 2 years too late and trying to make it mean something anyway. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. His operations director was calling ahead of schedule, which meant something had already reached him. That was fast. That was actually faster than Tae-jun had expected, which meant the letter had done more than reach Park. It had already moved. He answered. Tell me, he said. Chairman Park's office reached out to our liaison 40 minutes ago, his director said. They're requesting clarifications on the nature of our current partnership agreements, specifically whether the current agreements reflect the pause, the sound of papers, the full and accurate representation of our organizational circumstances, which was the polished version of. We received something that made us uncertain, and we want to know if we should be uncertain. Tell them I'll call Park directly in the morning, Tae-jun said. Personal call. Make sure his office knows it's coming from me directly. He paused. And find out which of our other associates have been contacted. I need a full list. Understood. He ended the call. Yeonji was watching him. She knew Park was the one that mattered, Tae-jun said. It wasn't a question. He was just saying it out loud, putting the architecture together in real time. She's known for years that Park is the relationship I've invested most heavily in. If she could put doubt in his mind, even a small amount, even just enough to make him cautious, that's leverage. That's something she could use later. Look what your wife is costing you. Even Park is uncertain now. You can still fix this. Yeonji didn't say anything. She's been thinking 10 moves ahead, he said, for 4 years. Your mother is a very intelligent woman, Yeonji said carefully. I know that, he said. That's not a new piece of information. He looked at the letter on the table. What's new is understanding that she was willing to use it this way. He drove home. He sat in the driveway for 4 minutes, not 5, not 7-4, because he didn't have Imani's patience, and he was not trying to find it tonight. And then he went inside. Imani was in the kitchen. She had made dinner. Actual dinner, not eggs and toast, not something functional and practical, but real food. Kind she made when she was trying to give her hands something to do and her mind something to organize, because the alternative was sitting alone with the contents of her own skull. There was rice and something that smelled like the jerk chicken she made when she needed comfort, and she was standing at the stove with her back to the door. When he came in, and she turned around and read his face immediately. She turned the stove down. "Sit," she said. He sat. She brought 2 plates to the table, sat across from him, looked at him. "Tell me," she said. He told her about Yeonji, about the letter, about Chairman Park and the other associates, and what his director had said about the clarification request. He told her all of it directly, without softening any of it, because he had promised her she would be part of the decisions, and that promise began with making sure she had the complete picture. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Seong-woo wrote the letter." "Yes. But your mother gave him the contact information, the names, who to send it to." "Yes. So it wasn't Song-woo's initiative. He's not capable of this kind of initiative," Tae-jun said. "He knew who to approach and what it would do to me professionally, because she told him. He's a delivery mechanism, and he did it. The night after everything happened, at the estate," Imani said. "After you tore up the check. After you," she stopped. Put her fork down. She didn't accept it. She lost the direct confrontation, and she didn't accept it. She went immediately to the backup. "Yes." Imani looked at her plate. "Chairman Park," she said. "I'll call him tomorrow morning," Tae-jun said, directly. "Whatever the letter planted, I can address it." "Can you?" "Park has known me for 15 years, he said. "He knows what I've built and how I've built it. One letter from a cousin he's never met is not going to override 15 years. But it plants something," Imani said. "Even if he believes you over the letter, even if he's completely rational about it, something got planted. Some version of my name now exists in his mind attached to a question mark." She looked up. That's what she wanted. Not for him to end the partnership, just for there to be a crack. Just enough that if she ever needed to point to something, she could. Tae-jun looked at her. She wasn't wrong. She had a way of seeing the precise mechanism of a thing, stripping away the emotional surface, and getting to the working parts underneath. He had fallen in love with that quality years ago, across a conference table. Right now it was both an asset and painful, in a way he didn't have a word for. "Eat," he said. "I'm not hungry, Imani." "I know." "Eat. Keep the body functioning." She picked the fork back up, moved food around the plate. "What are you going to do about your mother?" "Tomorrow," he said. "Everything happens tomorrow." "You've been saying tomorrow." "Because I needed the information I didn't have yet," he said. "I have it now." Something in his voice made her look at him carefully. She had learned to read his registers. The anger that expressed itself as stillness, the resolve that expressed itself as simplicity. What she heard in his voice right now was neither of those exactly. It was something older, harder. The particular tone of a man who has finished the process of deciding and moved into the territory of doing. "Don't do anything that can't be undone," she said. "Imani, I mean it," she said. "I know you. I know what you're capable of, and I know what world you come from, and I am telling you, whatever you do tomorrow, stay on the right side of a line you can live with." He looked at her for a long moment. "That line," he said, "has been moved for me, by my own family, using my own money, against my own wife. I know that. The letter to Park could cost me. I know that too," she said. "I know what it costs. And I'm still telling you, stay on the right side of a line you can live with. Because whatever happens with your mother, you have to be able to look at yourself afterward. And so do I." The table was quiet. Then he nodded. "Once." "All right," he said. He called Park at 7:30 the next morning. Park answered himself, which was either a good sign or a sign that the situation had escalated enough to require his direct attention. Tae-jun had been doing business long enough to know the difference usually revealed itself in the first 10 seconds of a call. "Tae-jun," Park said, "warm, careful. The warmth of a man who genuinely likes you and is also a professional." "I'm calling about a letter," Tae-jun said. "I'm told your office received it yesterday." A brief pause. "Yes, I want to be direct with you, Chairman. The letter was sent by a member of my extended family without my knowledge or authorization. The information in it is he chose the word carefully assembled in a way that is designed to create an impression that does not reflect reality." "I see," Park said. "My wife is a person of complete integrity," Tae-jun said. "What was implied in that letter is the work of someone who wants to damage my marriage and is not above using professional relationships to do it. I am telling you directly so that if there is any doubt in your mind, I can address it now rather than let it sit." Silence for a moment. Then Park said, "I appreciate you calling." "Of course." Tae-jun. A pause. The letter was I read it, and I have been in business long enough to recognize when something is being handed to me as a tool rather than as information. I didn't respond to your cousin's framing. I asked my office to reach out to yours because I wanted to understand the situation, not because I gave the letter any particular credence. Tae-jun let out a breath he had been holding without realizing it. I'm glad to hear that, he said. Your wife came to our anniversary dinner 2 years ago, Parks said, with the slightly warmer tone of a man returning to more comfortable ground. She brought my wife a book she had mentioned wanting. Tracked it down herself. Wrapped it properly. A pause. My wife still has it. Talks about it. Another pause, smaller. A man's character is visible in who he loves and how he loves them. I've always thought that. You chose well. The call ended 4 minutes later. Tae-jun sat with his phone on his desk for a moment. Then he stood up. He had 3 more calls to make the other associates Song-woo had contacted, and he made all 3 before 9 o'clock. Each one took a different approach, because each relationship had a different texture, and Tae-jun was fluent in the language of professional trust in all its variations. By 9:15, the letters had been neutralized. Not erased, you couldn't erase something once it had been received, but addressed, contextualized, diffused. Then he called Seong-woo. Seong-woo answered, with the practiced calm of a man who had been waiting for this call and had prepared himself for it. Tae-jun, he said. You sent letters to my business associates, Tae-jun said, using information from a private document commissioned by my mother. You contacted people in my professional network to imply that my wife's character was in question. Song-woo started to speak. Don't, Tae-jun said. I'm not asking for your explanation. I'm telling you what you did so there's no ambiguity between us about what this conversation is about. A pause. You have been drawing an allowance from the family account for 3 years. You are currently a director of one of my subsidiary companies at a salary that reflects my generosity rather than your contribution. I have funded 2 of your business ventures. Both failed. I funded them anyway because you are family, and I believed in giving family the benefit of the doubt. Silence on the other end. That's done, Tae-jun said. All of it. Effective today. Your position will be formally concluded by end of week, and the allowance payments will stop immediately. If you have concerns about the process, you can speak to my legal team. Tae-jun, listen to me, your mother asked me to do it. She said you need to know the truth about Song-woo. His voice didn't rise. It never rose. Don't use my mother's name as a shield right now. She asked, and you chose. You chose to write those letters. You chose to contact Chairman Park. You made a calculation that you could survive this and possibly benefit from it, and the calculation was wrong. That's on you. A beat. Don't contact me again unless it's through my legal team. He ended the call. His hands were steady. He had expected to feel something relief, maybe, or a darker satisfaction. He felt neither. He felt the specific, empty clarity of someone who has done a necessary thing and is already looking at what comes next. What came next was his mother. He drove to the estate at 11. Not calling ahead. He had considered it and decided against it, because a call would give her time to prepare, and what he needed was the conversation without her armor fully assembled. He needed her as close to unprepared as Mi-suk was capable of being. The estate was quiet when he arrived. Mid-morning quiet, the kind that made the spaces between sounds feel deliberate. He let himself in with his key to a house that existed because of what he had built, and found his mother in the sitting room off the main hall. She was having tea. She looked up when he appeared in the doorway, and her expression went through several things very quickly: surprise, then calculation, then the composed neutrality she deployed when she needed to not show anything. You should have called, she said. I know, he said. He sat down across from her. Not in the chair she would have gestured him toward. He chose his own, pulled it slightly so they were facing each other directly. She looked at him. The letters, he said. Mi-suk set her cup down with careful precision. I had to do something, she said. After what happened after you. After I tore up the check. After you made decisions without understanding the full situation. I understood the full situation better than you realized, he said. I had the file. Her composure flickered. Just slightly. What file? The 43 pages, he said. The background report. The Daniel Reeves section. The research service you retained 14 months ago. He watched her face. I had all of it. I read all of it. I know what it was designed to do and when you were planning to use it. My-suk was very still. The letters to Park and the others were damage control, he said. You lost the direct approach, so you tried to seed doubt in my professional relationships and hoped that pressure from that direction would accomplish what the check didn't. That's the logic. He paused. It didn't work. I've spoken to all 4 contacts. The letters have been addressed. Mi-suk looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, You've spoken to Yeonji. Yes. She came to you. Yes. Something moved across Mi-suk's face. Not exactly hurt. It was too composed to be called hurt, but something adjacent to it. The particular sensation of having your own architecture turned against you, of having someone inside your trusted circle step outside it. She was always too soft, Mi-suk said. She was right, Tae-jun said. That's not softness. Mi-suk looked at her tea, then up at him. I want you to hear me, she said. Not as a son hearing his mother make excuses. I want you to actually hear me. She straightened slightly. I have made mistakes. The letters were impulsive. Song-woo acted faster than I intended. A pause that cost her something. Some of what I've done has gone further than I should have let it go. He waited. But the core of it, she said, the core concern, Tae-jun, I have watched you your entire life. I have watched what you carry. I have watched what this name costs and what protecting it requires. And I have watched you over 4 years absorbing something that you should not have had to absorb. Tension. Separation between worlds that should be unified. A marriage that exists in its own space, disconnected from the family, from the structures that's not her fault, he said. It's nobody's fault, Mi-suk said. That's my point. Some distances cannot be closed by intention alone. Some you created the distance, he said. Every dinner she sat in the wrong seat. Every invitation that forgot her name. Every conversation in Korean just fast enough to be exclusionary. You built the distance, deliberately, and then you pointed at it and said, look, she doesn't fit. He looked at his mother. You manufactured the evidence for your own case. Mi-suk opened her mouth. Don't, he said. Don't tell me you were trying to help me. Don't tell me you were protecting the family. I know those words, and I know what they cost, and I know that sometimes they're true, and sometimes they're just the story people tell about the thing they wanted to do anyway. He leaned forward. You didn't want her here. From the first photograph, from the first phone call I made telling you I was getting married, you didn't want her here. And everything after that was in service of that want. Dress it however you need to. The room was very quiet. Mi-suk's hands, folded in her lap, tightened against each other. She didn't look away from him. All right, she said. Her voice was different. Not defeated. She would not be defeated. Not today, but stripped of something. The professional composure, the strategic positioning. What was left underneath was his mother, 61 years old, and frightened in a way she hadn't shown anyone in 36 years. All right, you want the truth without the frame. Here it is, she breathed. I am terrified that you are in a marriage that is going to isolate you, that you will build your world entirely around one person, and that person will eventually people leave, Tae-jun. They leave, or they die, or something breaks, and if you have made her your entire world and she goes, she stopped. Your father made me his entire world, and when he died there was nothing. No structure, no support, nothing. I rebuilt everything from zero with a child, and no help and no. She stopped again. He hadn't expected that. He sat with it, the weight of it, the thing underneath the strategy, underneath the file and the check and the letters, and 4 years of careful cruelty, the thing that had been driving it all along, which was not malice, which was fear, old, deep, structuring fear. The fear of a woman who had survived the worst possible loss and had spent 30 years making sure it could never happen again. That's not a justification, he said finally, quietly. No, she said. It's not. It helps me understand, he said. Doesn't make it right. I know that. Imani is not the risk you think she is, he said. And even if every fear you have turned out to be correct, that would be my risk to take. My life, my choice. He met her eyes. You raised me to build things, to be capable of surviving hard things. You taught me that, and then you spent 4 years trying to protect me from the consequences of my own choices as if I were still the child in that apartment, and you were still the only thing standing between me and disaster. I'm not that anymore. You have to let me not be that. Mi-suk looked at her son, and something happened in her face, slow, almost imperceptible, the kind of shift that takes a long time to arrive and can't be rushed. The beginning of something that wasn't acceptance yet, but might, given enough time and enough honesty, become it. What happens now, she said. Quiet now, he said. You're going to stay in this house. Not because nothing changes, things are going to change. I've already started that process, and I'm not reversing it. But I'm not removing you from your home. That's not what I'm doing. She waited. What I am doing, he said, is telling you that the next time you are in a room with my wife, you treat her with respect. Not tolerance, not managed civility. Respect. The kind she has earned by showing up every time, every dinner, every family occasion, every time you made it harder to walk through that door. Kind that costs you something because you've spent 4 years old. He paused. And if you can't do that, if that is genuinely beyond what you're willing to do, then the relationship between us becomes something different. Not severed, but different and smaller. Mysuk absorbed that. I need time, she said. I know, he said. I'm not asking for it to happen today, but you're asking for it to happen. Yes, he said. I am. He stood. She looked up at him from her chair, this woman who had raised him on nothing, who had put her body between him and disaster more times than he could count, who had built herself into something formidable out of grief and necessity and sheer refusal to be broken. He knew all of that. He held all of that. He did not let it move him from where he stood. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. He walked out of the sitting room, down the main hall, past the formal dining room, where 3 nights ago, a different version of this had all begun. He pushed through the front door of the estate. The air outside was cold and clear, the sky white with late morning cloud, the kind of day that looks like it hasn't decided what it's going to be yet. His phone rang. Imani, he answered. How did it go, she said. When, he said. Are you okay? He thought about the question honestly. I will be, he said. Are you coming home? Yes. I made breakfast, she said. Real breakfast. Come home and eat it. He stood in the driveway of the estate and looked at the house his money had maintained for years and felt the particular complicated weight of loving people who hurt you, the weight that doesn't have a clean resolution, that asks you to hold contradictory things at once, that demands a kind of maturity that nobody asks for and everyone eventually has to find. I'm on my way, he said. He got in the car. And across the estate behind him, in the sitting room, with the cold tea and the quiet, Kang Mi-suk sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the space where her son had been, and for the first time in 4 years, possibly for the first time in 36, she let herself sit with the possibility that she had been wrong in a way that mattered, in a way that the breakfast Imani had made was still warm when he got home. Eggs, toast, the good coffee she reserved for mornings that needed it, a small bowl of fruit she had cut with the careful precision of someone who needed her hands occupied while she waited. She had set 2 plates. She was sitting at the kitchen table when he walked in, and she looked up at him with the expression of a woman who has been reading a person's face for 4 years and knows, before a single word is spoken, approximately where things stand. She looked at him for a long moment. Sit down, she said. Eat first. He sat. He ate. She ate too, more than the night before. And they didn't talk about any of it until both plates were mostly empty, and the coffee was down to the last inch, and the kitchen had settled into the particular quiet of a room where 2 people are comfortable, enough with each other to let silence be what it is. Then Imani said, Tell me, he told her. All of it, the sitting room, his mother's face, the thing Mi-suk had said about his father, and the fear underneath it all, the offer he had made and the condition he had attached to it, and what Mi-suk had said when he stood up to leave. He told it straight without editorializing, because Imani deserved the unfiltered version, and he was too tired for anything else. She listened the way she always listened, with her whole attention, not interrupting, not reshaping what he said to fit what she already thought, just taking it in. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. She's afraid, Imani said. Yes. Not of me specifically. No, of what losing you would do to me, of what losing anyone does. He paused. She watched my father die, and she rebuilt everything from nothing. That kind of thing, it doesn't leave. It becomes part of the structure of how you see the world. I know, Imani said quietly. He looked at her. I know what that does to a person, she said. My mother worked double shifts for 15 years because my father left and she had 4 kids. And the thing that fear teaches you is that you do everything yourself because relying on someone else is just a way of building something. That can be taken away. She looked at her coffee. I recognized something in your mother a long time ago. I just didn't understand what I was recognizing. That doesn't excuse what she did, he said. No, she said.
Yeah.
It doesn't. But it helps me understand what I'm actually dealing with. What we're actually dealing with. She looked at him. She's not a villain, Tae-jun. She's a person who got so afraid of the wrong thing that she did real damage trying to prevent it. He was quiet. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt, she said. It hurt. 3 attempts. 4 years, the file, the letters to Park. She said it plainly, without performance. Just the accounting of it. That's real damage, and it's going to take real time. But understanding what drove it, that changes what I think is possible. He looked at her across the kitchen table. This woman who had pushed back a $2 million check without a second's hesitation, who had sat in the car outside the estate for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and still gone in, who had carried 4 years of quiet damage alone to protect a man who should have been protecting her instead, and who was sitting here, now finding the thread of something that looked like compassion for the person who had caused it. He had loved her for 6 years. He thought he knew her. He was still occasionally surprised. What do you want to do, he said. Not what's smart, not what's strategic. What do you actually want? She thought about it. Really thought. Not reaching for the first reasonable-sounding answer. I want to give it a chance to be different, she said finally. A real chance. Not me absorbing things in silence and calling that patience. An actual chance where she makes real effort, and I acknowledge it when she does. Where things are said clearly, and not through seating arrangements and envelopes. She paused. But I need something from her first. Something direct, not managed through you. She'll resist that, he said. I know. She might not be capable of it. Not quickly. Then it takes time, Imani said. I'm not in a hurry. I've been here 4 years. I can wait for something real. She met his eyes. But I'm not performing acceptance of an apology that hasn't happened yet. That's what I've been doing. I'm done doing that. He nodded slowly. I'll tell her, he said. No, Imani said. I'll tell her. When it's time. When she's ready to have that conversation, I'll be the one to have it. She picked up her coffee cup. That's part of it. She needs to deal with me directly. Not through you. Not managed. Directly. He looked at her for a moment. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. The morning settled around them. The weeks that followed were not easy, and nobody pretended they were. Tae-jun's restructuring of the family arrangements moved forward with the methodical precision he had promised Imani. Songwoo's position was formally concluded by that Friday. The allowance payments stopped. The family account was brought under tighter authorization requirements. Nothing moved without Tae-jun's direct sign-off. The cousins who had sat in the dining room that night and laughed quietly and said nothing received no formal communication, but the architecture of what they depended on quietly shifted, and they understood what that meant. Kinder cousin, Yeonji, was treated differently. She wasn't rewarded. Tae-jun didn't work that way. Didn't believe in transactional loyalty. Didn't want people doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. But she was not diminished either, and she understood the distinction. Songwoo called twice. Tae-jun didn't answer. His sister sent a message to Imani, a long, meandering message that was part apology and part explanation, and mostly self-justification, and Imani read it once and didn't reply, because she had learned to distinguish between the gestures people make, to relieve their own discomfort and the ones that cost them something real. Mi-suk called Tae-jun 4 times in the first week. Each call was brief. She was not making demands. She was not arguing. She seemed, from the texture of those calls, to be doing something. She had very little practice doing waiting. Sitting inside a situation she hadn't engineered and couldn't control, and finding some way to be in it without immediately reaching for a lever. He didn't tell Imani the content of those calls. Not because he was keeping things from her. They had agreed, explicitly, that the era of protective silence was done for both of them, but because the calls didn't contain anything yet that needed to be passed along. They were his mother, breathing. Finding her footing, he gave her that. Imani threw herself into work. She had a project. She had been half neglecting, for a month, a consulting engagement that required her full attention, and she gave it that, sitting in the study for long hours, building something she could control with her own hands. Tae-jun noticed that she came out of the study in the evenings lighter than she'd gone in, which told him the work was doing what work does for certain people. It reminded them of their own capability. He noticed other things. She stopped having the glass of wine she'd been pouring herself most evenings. Not dramatically, not as a declaration. She just didn't pour it one night, and then she didn't the next night either. He didn't comment on it. Some things you note without annotating. She started sleeping better. He knew because he woke less often in the night to the feeling of her lying awake beside him, that particular quality of wakefulness that radiates differently than sleep. By the second week, she was sleeping through or close to it, and he lay in the dark some nights and felt something he could only describe as the specific relief of a person whose nervous system has been braced for impact for a very long time and is tentatively, cautiously beginning to unbrace. 3 weeks after the estate, Imani's phone rang on a Tuesday morning. She was in the study. She looked at the screen and sat very still for a moment. Kang Misuk. She let it ring a second time. Then she picked up. Imani, Misuk said. Misuk. She hadn't called her Imoanim in 2 years. Misuk had never asked her to. A pause. The kind of pause that precedes something difficult. I would like to see you, Misuk said. If you're willing. Not at the estate. Somewhere of your choosing. Imani looked at the wall of the study. She had a print there, something abstract, blues and grays, that she'd bought at a market in D. C the year before she went to Seoul. She had always liked it because it looked like weather, like the moment just before rain decides what it's going to do. Not this week, she said. I'll let you know when I'm ready. Pause. All right, Sisuk said, and then after a beat that cost something, thank you for answering. Call ended. Imani sat with the phone in her hand. She was not ready yet. She knew that. She had sat with enough therapist-adjacent self-awareness over the years to understand the difference between readiness and the performance of readiness. And she was not going to give Maisuk a meeting she wasn't actually ready to walk into. Not again. She had walked into too many rooms in that family not ready, had spent 4 years showing up before she'd finished bracing, and it had cost her things she was still in the process of recovering. She would go when she was ready. She put the phone down and went back to work. It was 5 weeks before she called back. She chose a restaurant. She knew well a small Korean place, not far from their house, owned by a couple in their 60s, who had been cooking in the same kitchen for 30 years, and whose food was so straightforwardly good that nobody came there to perform anything, just to eat. Imani had discovered it in her first year in the country, before she understood much of the language or the customs, when she had just been a woman looking for a meal that felt real. She told Masuk the name and the time. She went alone. She told Tae-jun she was going, and he said one word okay, in a tone that contained everything he wanted to say, and was deliberately not saying, because he had promised she would handle this herself, and he intended to keep that promise, even when keeping it required him to drive to the other side of the city and sit in his office doing paperwork. He didn't need to do just to keep his hands occupied. Maisuk was already there when Imani arrived. That itself was something. Maisuk was a woman who arrived when she chose to arrive. Her time was structural, it communicated things. The fact that she was already seated, already waiting, was not nothing. She looked different than she had at the estate. Smaller somehow. Not physically, she was still the same controlled, upright woman she had always been, but something in the carriage had changed. Some of the deliberate authority had been set aside. She was wearing less jewelry than usual. She looked like a person rather than a position. Imani sat down across from her. They looked at each other. Thank you for coming, Misuk said. Yes, Imani said. A server came. They ordered. Misuk deferred to Imani's order, which she had never done before, had always, in previous restaurant settings, navigated menus with the quiet authority of a woman who knew better than whoever she was with. The deferral was small. It was real. They sat with tea while they waited. Maisuk looked at her hands on the table, then at Imani. I want to say something, she said, and I want to say it without conditions, without the but at the end, without explanation attached to it that turns it into something else. She steadied herself. The way a person steadies before they step somewhere that doesn't feel solid. What I did was wrong. The check. The file. The letters I know Yeonji told him. I know he told you. The 4 years of managed exclusion. The dinner with Jia. She stopped. All of it. It was wrong. You did nothing to deserve any of it. And I am sorry. Imani looked at her. Without the but, she said. Without the but, Mi-suk said. The silence that followed was the first honest silence they had ever shared. All the previous silences between them had been tactical spaces, where one of them was maneuvering or the other was absorbing. This one was just silence. Two women sitting with the weight of 5 years between them. Can I tell you something? Imani said. Please, Mi-suk said. I knew from the first dinner that you hadn't accepted me. I could feel it the way you can feel a room's temperature before you understand why it's cold. She held Mi-suk's gaze, and I made a decision. I decided I was going to keep showing up, keep being present, keep being real enough, that eventually you'd have to deal with the actual persons instead of whatever you'd decided I was. She paused. I thought patience was the same as strength. I thought absorbing things without complaint proved something. It did prove something, Mi-suk said quietly. No, Imani said. It proved I could take damage. That's not the same thing. She looked at the table briefly, then back. I should have said something to you directly, a long time ago. I should have named what was happening, instead of waiting for you to decide to stop. She breathed. I did that partly for Tae-jun, and partly because I was afraid. Afraid that saying it out loud would make it more real. That confronting it would force a conclusion I wasn't ready for. Mi-suk was very still. I'm not saying that to shift responsibility, Imani said. What you did was yours to own and you've owned it. I'm saying it's because if we're going to try to build something different from here, and I'm open to trying, I want you to know that I am genuinely open to it, then we need to be honest about what both of us contributed to how bad it got. She looked at Mi-suk. I kept things from Tae-jun I absorbed instead of speaking. I let you believe your silence was working because my silence let you believe it. Mi-suk looked at her for a long time. You're more like him than I realized, she said finally. Like who? Like Tae-jun, a small pause. He does that too. Holds things. Thinks if he carries it himself, he can control the outcome. Something moved across her face, not quite a smile, not quite grief. I suppose I taught him that. The food arrived, they ate. It was not comfortable. Exactly. Comfort was not something either of them had with the other yet, and pretending otherwise would have undone everything the last 10 minutes had built. But it was real, they talked. Carefully at first, then less so. Mi-suk asked about Imani's consulting work. Not performatively, she asked specific questions that indicated she had paid attention to things Tae-jun had mentioned over the years, had retained them, even while constructing the case against her. That itself was a strange thing to sit with the evidence of someone who had been watching her closely enough to know things about her while simultaneously trying to remove her. You paid attention, Imani said. Mi-suk looked slightly caught. Yes. You knew things about my work, what I was building. Yes. But you still decided I wasn't good enough, Imani said. Not accusatory. Just honest. Mi-suk was quiet for a moment. I decided, she said slowly, that you were a threat. Not because you weren't good enough. Because you were sufficient. In yourself. You didn't need the family. You didn't need the name. You didn't need Tae-jun's world to complete yours. She looked at Imani. I told myself that was a weakness. That a wife should be invested in the family, should be connected to the structure. The truth, which I have been sitting with for 5 weeks, is that what frightened me was that you were capable of leaving, that you could survive without any of it. And a person who can survive without you, she stopped. A person who stays because they choose to, and not because they need to. That person can also choose to go, at any time, for any reason. And if Tae-jun had made himself entirely dependent on someone who could simply choose to go, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Imani sat with it. The logic of it, the terrible fear-driven logic that had transformed her independence into a threat in Mi-suk's mind. The way love, filtered through that much fear, becomes a kind of ownership. A grasping. He can survive without me too, Imani said. He's Kang Tae-jun, the man who built an empire from nothing. He could survive losing anyone. I know that, Mi-suk said, intellectually. But you didn't believe it. I believe that survival and recovery are different things, Mi-suk said. I survived your father-in-law's death. I am still recovering from it. A pause. That is not a comparison I say lightly. Imani looked at this woman across the table, 61 years old, rebuilt from zero, so determined that the catastrophe never happened again, that she had engineered a smaller one trying to prevent it. I'm not going anywhere, Imani said. Suk looked at her. I want to be clear about that, Imani said. Not because I need to reassure you, that's not my job, but Because it's true, and you should know it's true. I married your son because I love him. Not his name. Not his money. Not the power of his name. Him. She held Mi-suk's gaze. The same man you raised. The one who calls instead of texting, because he thinks real calls matter. The one who bought our house because I stood outside it for 30 seconds and said it felt right. That man. I'm not going anywhere. Mi-suk looked at the table. When she looked back up, her eyes were different. Not wet Mi-suk would not cry in a restaurant, possibly would not cry anywhere. Some walls are structural, but something had changed behind them. Some things that had been braced had shifted. I would like, she said carefully, the opportunity to know you. Actually know you. Not, she paused. Not the version of you I constructed to fit the decision I had already made. The actual person. That's going to take time, Imani said. Yes, and I'm going to need you to be patient with me, Imani said, because I am going to be careful. I have been in that family for 4 years, and I know what it feels like when the warmth is managed. When it's strategic, I'll be able to tell the difference. I know you will, Mi-suk said, and there was something in the way she said it, a recognition, a respect for the precision Imani was bringing to this that was itself a kind of beginning. Okay then, Imani said. Okay, Mi-suk said. They finished their food. Mi-suk insisted on paying, and Imani let her, because some gestures are not about money, and receiving them gracefully is its own kind of generosity. They stood outside on the pavement after the city moving around them, and there was a moment that asked whether there would be an embrace, and both of them felt it, and both of them, without discussing it, let it pass. Too soon. Too much architecture to build before that kind of ease. Mi-suk inclined her head, a small formal gesture that was nonetheless genuine. Imani nodded back. They parted in opposite directions. She told Tae-jun that evening. He was in the kitchen when she came home, which was unusual. He almost never cooked, had a complicated relationship with cooking that she had long since stopped trying to understand. But he had apparently decided tonight required effort, and there were things on the stove and something in the oven, and the kitchen smelled like something was not entirely going to plan. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watches him. He turned around, read her face. How was it, he said. It was hard, she said. It was necessary. It was a beginning. She paused. Don't ask me to evaluate it more than that yet. I'm still inside it. Okay, he said. She looked at the stove. What are you doing? Making dinner. You don't cook. I'm learning, he said, with the specific dignity of a man who is not going to admit how many things have already gone wrong in this kitchen in the last hour. She looked at the pan. Something about it was not encouraging. Move over, she said. I have it, Tae-jun. I have it, Imani. She looked at him. He looked at her. He stepped aside. She stepped in. He stood next to her while she fixed whatever he had started, and he didn't say anything useful, and she didn't ask him to, and the kitchen filled with the sounds of a meal being made in a house where two people have decided, continuously and imperfectly, to keep choosing each other. 6 months later, the Kang family dinner was different in ways that were small and ways that were not. The estate was the same. The table was the same. The good dishes and the formal setting and the weight of the house itself all the same. But the people in the room had been rearranged by consequence and choice. Sung-woo was absent. 2 other cousins who had made their calculation and gotten it wrong had found reasons not to attend. Yeon-ji was present near Imani in a proximity that had the easy naturalness of a friendship that had been cautiously and genuinely built over months. Mi-suk was at the head of the table. She was still Mi-suk. She would never not be, would never lose the posture or the authority or the careful way she moved through rooms. But something in the deployment of it had changed. She spoke to Imani directly that evening. Not warmly, not yet warmth was being built brick by careful brick, but directly, genuinely, without the careful management of tone that Imani had spent 4 years recognizing and navigating. Mi-suk asked about the consulting project. She listened to the answer. She did not redirect. She did not soften the attention with a turn toward someone else. It was not resolved. Nothing was resolved in the way that stories resolve, with a clean closure that accounts for all the damage and files it neatly away. Mi-suk still held herself at a slight remove from the full tenderness that the situation asked of her. Imani still clocked things, still noticed inflections, still maintained the part of her that had been trained by 4 years to stay alert. The watchfulness didn't disappear overnight. She suspected it would take a long time to unlearn, if it ever fully did. But she was there. She was at the table. When Tae-jun entered the dining room that evening, he entered with Imani beside him. Not following, not trailing, beside him, matching his pace, her shoulder at the level of his arm. He had held the door, and she had walked through it first, and then he had come through after, and they had arrived into the room together in the way of two people who have stopped performing their partnership and are simply in it. He pulled her chair out. She sat. The chair was at the head of the table to his right, not at the far end, not beside someone she didn't know, positioned to be invisible. At the head, where she had belonged since the first dinner she had ever attended in this house, 4 years ago, when she had dressed in burgundy and stood in front of a mirror and told herself she belonged there. She had been right then. She just hadn't been able to make it real yet. Now it was real. Not because anyone had granted it. Not because Mi-suk had finally relented, or Tae-jun had declared it, or the room had been reorganized in her favor. But because she had stayed when leaving would have been easier and quieter, and arguably wiser. And because Tae-jun had finally stopped, assuming her silence meant everything was fine, and because the two of them had sat at a kitchen table, with cold tea at midnight, and decided, without fanfare, to tell each other the truth from here on out. That was the whole architecture. That was all it had ever required. Just that. Dinner was served. Conversation moved around the table in the way of families who are working, imperfectly and sometimes painfully, toward something better than what they were. Yeonji said something that made Imani laugh. A real laugh, not a polished social laugh, the kind that comes out before you can decide whether it's appropriate. Tae-jun looked at her when she laughed. The way he had been looking at her since at a conference table in Seoul, like she was worth paying full attention to. Mi-suk, at the head of the table, watched. And somewhere in the middle of the meal, when the food was mostly eaten and the conversation had found its natural, imperfect rhythm, Mi-suk reached for the water pitcher to refill her glass and found it empty. Before she could reach further, Imani picked up the pitcher nearest to her and leaned across to fill Mi-suk's glass. Small thing, the smallest possible thing. Mi-suk looked at Imani's hand on the pitcher, then up at Imani's face. Something in Mi-suk's expression moved in a way that nobody at the table would have been able to name if they'd been watching, but that Imani, who had spent 6 years learning to read the people she loved, recognized for what it was, the first unguarded thing Mi-suk had ever offered her. Not an apology, not a statement, not a gesture calculated to communicate. Just the face of a person who has been shown a kindness they weren't certain they deserved. "Thank you," Mi-suk said. 2 words. Quiet, real. "Of course," Imani said, and she went back to her food. Tae-jun, who had seen the whole thing from across the table, said nothing. He picked up his chopsticks. The meal continued. The evening continued. The family continued, as families do, with all the damage still present and all the work still ahead, and the particular, ordinary, irreplaceable quality of people choosing, in a well-lit room, to remain in each other's lives. After dinner, when the table was being cleared and conversations had broken into smaller clusters, Imani stood at the window on the far side of the dining room for a moment, looking out at the estate grounds. In the dark, she could see the shape of the garden, the path lights, the edge of the world that had been hostile to her and had required her to become something harder than she'd intended in order to survive it. She thought about the woman who had stood outside this house, in burgundy heels with her spine straight, and told herself she belonged there. She had been right. She had also been naive about what belonging would cost, what it would require her to carry, and what it would require her to say out loud, and what it would require her to demand, not ask for demand, with the full weight of someone who has earned the right to occupy the space they're standing in. She had paid that cost. She was still paying parts of it, in the small daily work of rebuilding what the damage had taken. In the night she still woke, slightly too alert. In the careful optimism she extended toward Mi-suk, one measured increment at a time. But she was here. She was at the table, and nobody in this room, not one person, was any longer uncertain about where she belonged. Tae-jun appeared beside her at the window, not saying anything. Just there, in the way he had learned to be there, present, without crowding, close, without requiring anything. She didn't look at him. She kept looking out at the dark garden. "You okay?" he said. Quiet. She thought about it. Honestly, the way she had taught herself to think about things, without the reflex to manage his concern. Yes, she said, and she meant it. Not perfectly okay, not resolved and filed away okay. Not the kind of okay that pretends the last 4 years happened to someone else, but the kind of okay that is built from having been not okay and having found your way through it without losing the essential thing, without losing yourself, without losing him, without losing the belief that showing up, even when showing up is the hardest thing available to you, is worth what it costs. That kind of okay, the real kind. She turned from the window. Tae-jun turned with her. They walked back to the table, to the noise, and the imperfect warmth of a family in the slow, unromantic process of becoming better than it was. Behind them, the dark garden held the night quietly, and the house held all of them, and outside the city moved on without caring about any of it, the way cities do, indifferent and alive, lit up in every direction, full of rooms where people are working out, in their own particular and painful and necessary ways, what it means to love someone well enough to tell them the truth.